She whispered, "Why did you return for me?" The cowboy said, "Because no one else would. People came here only when they had to, and they left as soon as they could. For those who stayed, life followed the same pattern every day. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. No one expected miracles here, and no one believed in them either." The girl had grown up in this town, but she had never truly belonged to it. From the beginning, her life had been shaped by absence. Her earliest memories were not of laughter or warmth, but of silence. A quiet house, empty chairs, doors that closed and never opened again. She learned the sound of leaving footsteps before she learned the sound of comfort. As a child, she used to wait by the window in the evenings. She would sit on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, watching the road that led out of town. Every time dust rose in the distance, her heart would beat faster. Maybe someone was coming back. Maybe this time the door would open again. But the dust always settled and the road always stayed empty. Her family was not cruel. They were simply tired, broken in ways they never talked about. One by one, they drifted away, chasing work, escape, or something they could not name. Some left with promises to return. Others left without saying goodbye. Eventually, there was no one left to wait for. The house became too big, too quiet, and finally it was no longer hers. She learned early how to take care of herself. She learned how to make simple meals, how to stretch money, how to stay invisible. In school, she sat in the back and spoke only when asked. Teachers noticed her grades but not her loneliness. Other students noticed her silence and decided it meant she didn't matter. She was not bullied loudly. She was ignored, which somehow hurt more. When she grew older, she took work wherever she could find it. Cleaning, helping at small shops, doing tasks no one else wanted. She never complained. Complaining felt useless when no one was listening. People in town saw her often, but they never really saw her. To them, she was just another quiet girl passing through their days. Rumors followed her without her understanding why. When someone lives alone and speaks little, people fill the silence with their own stories. Some said she was strange. Others said she thought she was better than everyone else. A few said she was unlucky, and that bad things seemed to happen around her. None of them asked her what was true. She heard the whispers sometimes when she walked past the market or stood in line for bread. They were not loud enough to confront, but clear enough to hurt. She learned to keep her head down and her pace steady. If she didn't react, they would lose interest. At least that's what she told herself. At night, when the town slept, she allowed herself to feel what she hid during the day. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind move through the fields. In those moments, the weight of being unwanted pressed heavily on her chest. She wondered if something was wrong with her, if she had been born missing something that made people stay. She tried not to hope. Hope had disappointed her too many times. Every time she let herself believe someone might care, reality reminded her to be careful. So she built walls quietly, brick by brick, using silence and distance. From the outside, she seemed strong. From the inside, she was tired. There were moments when kindness appeared briefly, like sunlight through clouds. A neighbor once left extra food at her door without explanation. A shop owner let her pay later when money was short. These moments confused her more than they comforted her. Kindness that didn't stay felt like another reminder that nothing lasted. She often walked beyond the edge of town, where the land opened wide and the sky felt closer. Out there, she could breathe freely. The fields did not judge her. The wind did not ask questions. She felt small but not invisible. Sometimes she talked to herself softly, not because she was lonely, but because she needed to hear a human voice that didn't sound disappointed. As years passed, she accepted that her life would be simple and quiet. No great love stories, no dramatic changes, just survival. She told herself that was enough. Still, deep inside, a small part of her heart refused to fully close. It waited, not loudly, not with expectation, but with a quiet question it never stopped asking: would anyone ever choose her? The town continued its slow rhythm. Seasons changed, people aged, children grew up and left. She stayed. Not because she wanted to, but because she had nowhere else to go. Leaving required belief in something better. She didn't have that kind of belief. One afternoon, as she worked near the edge of town, she noticed dust rising far down the road. It caught her attention only for a moment. Travelers passed through from time to time. She had learned not to look too long. Looking led to imagining, and imagining led to disappointment. Still, something made her pause. The dust moved steadily, not rushed, not careless. A shape slowly formed against the horizon. She told herself it meant nothing. Just another person passing through, like all the others. She went back to her work, unaware that this ordinary moment was quietly preparing to change something she thought was unchangeable. At that point, she didn't know that someone would see her not as a rumor, not as a burden, not as a forgotten figure in the background of a small town, but simply as a person. For now, she was still the girl everyone had left behind, still walking alone, still surviving quietly, still believing, even if she wouldn't admit it, that life had already decided her place. She had no idea that soon, someone would question that belief, and in doing so, challenge everything she thought she knew about being worth returning for. And so her story continued, not with hope, not with certainty, but with the same quiet endurance that had carried her this far. The road ahead looked just like the one behind her, empty, silent, unchanged. Or so it seemed. The dust on the road grew thicker as the figure came closer. She told herself not to stare, but her eyes lifted anyway. A rider moved at an easy pace, not rushing, not showing off. The horse was strong and calm, used to long roads and wide land. The man sitting tall in the saddle looked like someone who belonged to the open spaces. His clothes were worn, his hat shaded his face, and his movements carried the quiet confidence of a person who trusted the land and himself. She looked away first. People like him passed through often enough. They stopped for water, supplies, or rest, and then they were gone. There was no reason to imagine anything different. Still, she felt a strange pull, like the air itself had shifted. The town noticed him right away. Strangers were rare, and this one stood out. Children slowed their games to watch. Adults lifted their heads, curious but careful. He tied his horse near the general store and walked inside, boots heavy against the wooden floor. His presence filled the small space, not loudly but firmly. She happened to be there, organizing shelves near the back. When she heard the door open, she did not turn. Voices came and went all day. But when he spoke, something about his tone made her pause. It was calm and respectful, not demanding. He asked for supplies, not with impatience but with patience, as if time was not something he was fighting against. When she finally looked up, their eyes met for a brief moment. It was nothing dramatic, yet it felt different. He did not look through her. He did not rush past her presence. He looked as though he saw her clearly, as if she were part of the room, not just a shadow in the corner. She quickly returned to her task, unsure why her heart had begun to beat faster. She told herself it was foolish. A stranger's glance meant nothing. Still, she felt unsettled in a way she could not explain. Later that day, she saw him again near the water pump. She was filling a container, focused on not spilling, when she sensed someone nearby. He waited instead of stepping ahead of her. When she noticed him, he tipped his hat slightly, not in a way meant to impress but simply polite. "You can go first," he said. She shook her head. "I'm almost done." He nodded and waited, resting a hand on the fence. They stood in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. She felt no pressure to speak. When she finished, she stepped aside, and he thanked her like it mattered. These small moments repeated over the next day. He stayed longer than most travelers did. He helped repair a loose fence without being asked. He spoke to people carefully, listening more than talking. The town noticed his manners, but they also noticed where his attention went. He asked her name once softly, as if he didn't want to startle her. She answered, surprised that someone cared enough to ask. He said his own name, simple and plain, and that was all. No long story. No attempt to impress. They spoke in short conversations, never too personal, never rushed. He asked about the town, the weather, the land. She answered honestly, without trying to make things sound better than they were. He didn't argue or judge. He accepted her words as truth. What she noticed most was how he listened. When she spoke, he didn't interrupt. He didn't look around as if waiting for something more interesting. His attention stayed with her, steady and focused. It made her uncomfortable at first. She was not used to being heard. The town, however, was not silent. People whispered. They watched from a distance. Some were curious. Some were doubtful. A few warned him quietly, telling him she was not someone worth getting involved with. They spoke in half-truths and assumptions, shaped by years of misunderstanding. He listened to them too, but he did not repeat their words. He did not treat her differently afterward. If anything, he seemed more certain in the way he spoke to her, more careful not to let others define her. For her part, she tried to keep her distance. She reminded herself daily that he would leave. They always did. She did not ask about his journey or where he was headed next. Knowing would only make the leaving sharper. One evening, as the sky turned soft with fading light, she found him sitting near the edge of town, watching the fields. She almost walked past, but he noticed her and stood. "It's quiet out here," he said. She nodded. "That's why I come here." They sat a short distance apart, facing the same view. The land stretched wide and open, painted in gentle colors by the setting sun. For a while neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. Finally he spoke again. "You don't talk much." She felt her guard rise. "Is that a problem?" "No," he said quickly. "Just an observation. Some people fill silence because they're afraid of it." "And you?" she asked. He smiled slightly. "I trust silence. It usually tells the truth." That answer stayed with her long after she went home that night. Over the next few days, she noticed how her routine began to change. She caught herself looking toward the road, not with longing but with curiosity. She wondered if he would be there, if she would hear his voice again. It frightened her how easily her heart responded. He never made promises, never spoke of staying, never acted like he was saving her from anything. He treated her like someone capable, someone steady, someone worth time. That, more than anything, unsettled her. The morning he prepared to leave, the town gathered quietly, pretending not to care. She heard the sound of hooves and felt a familiar tightness in her chest. This was the part she knew too well. She kept working, telling herself not to look. When he approached, she felt his presence before she heard his voice. "I'm heading out," he said. She nodded without meeting his eyes. "Safe travels." He paused. "Take care of yourself." "I always do." For a moment he seemed like he wanted to say more. Then he tipped his hat, turned, and mounted his horse. As he rode away, dust rising behind him, she forced herself not to watch too long. This time, though, the ache felt different. Not sharper, but heavier. Something unspoken hung in the air, something unfinished. As the road swallowed his figure, she told herself it was better this way. Better to return to the life she knew than to risk believing in something temporary. She did not know that leaving was harder for him than it looked. She did not know that her quiet presence had followed him in a way no place ever had before. All she knew was that once again, someone had come into her life and disappeared down the same long road. And she wondered, not for the first time, why people always seemed to pass through, never stopping long enough to see what they left behind. The days after he left felt longer than the ones before he arrived. The town returned to its usual rhythm, but for her, something felt off. It was as if a quiet sound she had grown used to hearing was suddenly gone, leaving behind a strange emptiness. She told herself nothing had really changed. She had lived this way her whole life. One person passing through should not have mattered so much. She went back to her routine. She woke before sunrise, worked until her hands ached, and returned to her small room when the sky darkened. On the surface, everything looked the same, but inside her thoughts kept drifting back to small moments she hadn't expected to remember. The way he listened, the way he waited, the way he spoke as if her words carried weight. She scolded herself for thinking about him. People left. That was the rule of her life. Remembering only made the silence louder. At night, sleep came slowly. She would lie awake, staring into the darkness, replaying their quiet conversations. She wondered if she had imagined the connection, if it had only felt real because she was not used to being noticed. Maybe he had treated everyone the same way. Maybe she had been just another stop along his road. The thought should have comforted her. Instead, it made her chest feel heavy. As the days passed, the town seemed smaller. The streets felt narrower, the buildings closer together. Everywhere she went, she saw places where he had been. The water pump, the fence near the fields, the store doorway. These places held memories now, and memories were not something she knew how to carry easily. People noticed her distraction. A few asked if she was unwell. Others watched with quiet judgment. She heard whispers again, sharper this time. Some said she had gotten ideas above her place. Others said she must have driven him away. The words stung, even though she pretended not to hear them. She tried to drown out the noise by working harder. She took extra shifts, stayed late, and kept her hands busy so her mind would not wander. But exhaustion only made her thoughts louder. The more tired she became, the harder it was to push the feelings down. One afternoon, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Dark clouds gathered quickly and the wind picked up speed. People rushed to secure doors and windows. She was caught outside, carrying supplies, when the rain began to fall hard and fast. She ran for cover, her clothes soaked within seconds. She reached an old shed near the edge of town and took shelter inside. The rain drummed loudly on the roof, and the air smelled of wet earth. Standing there alone, surrounded by noise yet completely isolated, something inside her finally gave way. She slid down against the wall and let herself feel everything she had been holding back. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly as she always did. Tears came without sound, slipping down her face as she stared at the ground. It wasn't just about him. It was about every door that had closed, every back that had turned, every time she had been left behind without explanation. His leaving had simply reopened wounds that had never fully healed. When the storm passed, she wiped her face and stood up. She stepped back into the world as if nothing had happened. She had learned long ago how to hide pain behind calm movements and steady eyes. But the heaviness stayed. Over the next week, life became more difficult. Work slowed, money grew tight, and the small kindnesses she once relied on became scarce. The town was facing its own struggles, and when people struggled, they became less patient, less generous. One evening, after a long day, she returned to her room and found a note slipped under her door. It was short and impersonal, informing her that she would need to find another place to stay soon. No explanation, no apology. She sat on her bed, holding the paper in her hands, reading the words again and again. This was how things always happened, quietly, without warning, without concern for where she would go next. That night she didn't sleep at all. The following days blurred together. She packed what little she owned, unsure of her next step. She asked around carefully, but no one had space or interest. Some avoided her altogether. Others offered sympathy without solutions. As her options disappeared, so did her strength. She walked through the town feeling like a ghost, present but unseen. The fields she once found comfort in now felt endless and empty. One evening she walked beyond the familiar paths, farther than she usually went. The sun was low, painting the land in fading gold. She stopped near the road and watched the horizon, the same way she had as a child. She wondered why she kept surviving if life only asked her to endure more loss. She wasn't thinking of giving up. She was simply tired of fighting for a place that never seemed to exist. The wind picked up, carrying dust across the road. For a moment she imagined she heard hooves. Her heart lifted before her mind could stop it. Then she shook her head, almost angry at herself. "He's not coming back," she whispered, though no one was there to hear it. She turned away from the road, her shoulders heavy, and began the long walk back. Each step felt harder than the last. That night she reached a quiet breaking point. Not a dramatic one, not something anyone else would notice. Just a moment when she sat alone and admitted the truth to herself. She was lonely in a way that went deeper than being alone. She felt forgotten. She whispered into the darkness, not praying, not asking for miracles, just speaking honestly for the first time in a long while. "I tried, I really did." The words lingered in the air, unanswered. Far away, on a road stretching through open land, the cowboy rode under the same sky. He had tried to put distance between himself and the town, between himself and her. He told himself it was none of his business. He had his own life, his own responsibilities. But the silence around him felt wrong. He replayed their conversations, her quiet strength, the way she looked at the land as if it understood her better than people ever had. He remembered how the town spoke about her, and how little effort they had made to truly know her. The more he rode, the heavier his thoughts became. He realized he was not thinking about the road ahead, but about the one behind him. Back in the town, she stood at the window one last time, watching the night settle in. She did not expect anything anymore. Expectation had only brought pain. Still, somewhere deep inside, a small question stirred again. Not loud, not hopeful, just present. Was this really all life had planned for her? She closed the curtain and sat down, unaware that the choice she believed had already been made was, in fact, still unfolding. The road she thought led only away might yet carry someone back. For now, all she could do was endure the quiet, unaware that her loneliness was being felt by someone far beyond the edge of town. The morning began like all the others, quiet and heavy. She woke before the sun, her room filled with a pale gray light. The note about leaving lay folded on the small table beside her bed. She did not look at it anymore. She already knew every word by heart. There was nothing left to decide. Only time remained, moving forward without asking her opinion. She washed her face, tied her hair back, and stepped outside. The air felt cooler than usual, as if the land itself was holding its breath. She walked through the town with slow steps, not because she was tired, but because she had nowhere urgent to go. Each building passed like a memory she did not know whether to keep or forget. People went about their lives, unaware of the weight she carried. A shop opened its doors. Someone laughed in the distance. Life continued as it always did, indifferent and steady. She made her way toward the edge of town, the place where she felt least invisible. The field stretched wide before her, calm and endless. She sat on a low fence and let the silence wrap around her. For the first time in a long while, she did not fight it. She thought about leaving, not with excitement, not with fear, but with resignation. Leaving meant walking into the unknown with no promise of safety. Staying meant being pushed out slowly, piece by piece. Neither choice felt kind. As she stared at the road, memories surfaced without warning. The way he had waited his turn at the water pump. The way he had listened without interrupting. The way he had looked at her as if she mattered. She pushed the thoughts away, annoyed at herself for returning to them. "He's gone," she said aloud, her voice steady but tired. "That's how it always ends." The wind carried her words across the fields and scattered them like dust. Miles away, the cowboy had reached a place where the land opened even wider. He had camped for the night, but sleep refused to come. The fire burned low as he stared into the flames, his thoughts circling the same quiet presence he could not shake. He had tried to convince himself that turning back would only complicate things. He was used to moving forward, not looking behind him. Roads were easier than routes. Leaving was simpler than staying. But something about her had unsettled him, not in a dramatic way, not in a way that demanded action. It was the stillness of her, the quiet strength she carried without asking for recognition. He had seen many towns and many people. He knew loneliness when he saw it, and he knew what happened to those who were left unseen for too long. By morning, the decision made itself. He packed his gear, mounted his horse, and turned around. The road back felt different beneath him, as if it recognized his choice. As he rode, doubts tried to surface. What if he was wrong? What if she didn't want him to return? What if his presence only reopened wounds? He pushed the thoughts aside. He wasn't returning with promises. He wasn't returning to change her life. He was returning because leaving had felt like abandoning something important. Back in the town, the day stretched slowly. She spent the afternoon sorting her belongings, choosing what little she would take. Each item felt heavier than it should have. Every decision reminded her that she was closing a chapter without knowing what came next. The sun began to lower, painting the sky in soft colors. She stepped outside once more, drawn by habit toward the road. She told herself she was only taking one last look, one final goodbye to a place that had never truly held her. At first, she thought she was imagining it, a faint sound carried by the wind. She stiffened, listening closely. The rhythm was familiar, hooves. Her heart reacted before her mind could. She told herself not to turn, not to hope. Hope had never been kind to her. The sound grew clearer. Slowly, she turned. A figure appeared in the distance, moving steadily toward the town. The shape, the pace, the way the horse moved, it all felt unmistakable. Her breath caught and she stood frozen, unsure if she was awake or dreaming. As he drew closer, there was no doubt. It was him. He rode in without drama, without calling out. When he dismounted, he looked tired, dust-covered, and certain. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. She broke the silence first, her voice barely steady. "You left." "I did," he said simply. She swallowed. "Why are you back?" He looked at her, really looked, as if measuring his words carefully. "Because I kept thinking about what would happen if I didn't." Her chest tightened. "People leave me all the time," she said, not accusing, just stating a fact. "You didn't owe me anything." "I know," he replied. "That's why I came back." She searched his face for signs of pity or obligation and found none. There was only honesty. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Why did you return for me?" He did not answer quickly. He glanced around the quiet town, the empty road, the wide land that had swallowed so many goodbyes. "Because no one else would," he said. The words settled between them, heavy but gentle. They were not heroic. They were not romantic. They were real. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She turned away, embarrassed, but he did not move closer or farther. He stayed exactly where he was, giving her space, giving her choice. "I'm not here to save you," he said softly. "I just didn't want you to be forgotten." That was when something inside her shifted. Not all at once, not completely, but enough. For the first time, someone had come back not because they needed something, not because it was easy, but because they believed her presence mattered. The town watched quietly, sensing something had changed. The road that once only carried people away had brought someone back. She wiped her eyes and faced him again. Her voice was still soft but stronger now. "I don't know what happens next," he nodded. "Neither do I." They stood there as the sun dipped below the horizon, two people shaped by distance and silence, now sharing the same space. Nothing was solved. Nothing was promised. But for the first time, she was not standing alone at the edge of the road. And that in itself changed everything. The days after his return did not feel dramatic. There were no sudden changes, no loud celebrations, no promises spoken under the sky. Life moved forward slowly as it always had. But something subtle had shifted, like the land after a quiet rain. Nothing looked different at first glance, yet everything felt softer, more possible. He did not rush her. That was the first thing she noticed. He did not demand answers or plans. He stayed nearby, helping where help was needed, fixing small things around town, earning his place not with words but with steady actions. When he spoke to her, it was the same calm tone as before, respectful and patient. For her, this was unfamiliar territory. She was used to people deciding for her, leaving before she could understand what was happening. Now, someone had returned and chosen to remain without asking her to change who she was. That frightened her more than being left behind ever had. They walked together sometimes, not always talking. Silence still existed between them, but it no longer felt empty. It felt shared. When she spoke, she noticed she did not have to measure every word. When she was quiet, she did not feel the need to apologize for it. The town watched closely. Some people softened toward her, surprised by the change they could not explain. Others remained distant, unsure what to make of a man who had turned back for someone they had already dismissed. He did not challenge them. He did not defend her loudly. He simply stayed. One afternoon, as they sat near the fields, she finally spoke the question that had been resting inside her. "You didn't know me," she said. "Not really. How could you be so sure?" He considered her words carefully. "I wasn't sure," he replied. "I just knew what I saw, someone who had learned how to stand alone for too long." She looked down at her hands. "Standing alone isn't strength," she said quietly. "Sometimes it's just what happens when no one stands with you." He nodded. "That's why I came back." Those words did not erase her past, but they softened it. For the first time, she felt her story was not being judged, only understood. Over time, she allowed herself small risks, a longer conversation, a shared smile, a moment of laughter that surprised her with its ease. She still guarded her heart, but the walls she had built began to lower piece by piece. The note about leaving her room was resolved quietly. Someone had spoken on her behalf. She did not ask who. She had a feeling she already knew. For once, she did not feel guilty for being helped. Evenings became something she no longer feared. Instead of sitting alone, staring into the dark, she found comfort in simple routines. Cooking together, listening to the sounds of the land settling for the night, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. He spoke little of his past, but when he did, it was honest. He had lived a life of movement, believing that staying meant being trapped. He had learned that leaving prevented loss. But her quiet presence had challenged that belief. She had shown him that some things were worth returning for, even if the future was uncertain. She, in turn, began to see herself differently, not through the town's whispers, not through the silence of those who had left, but through the steady gaze of someone who saw her without needing her to prove anything. There were still hard days. Trust did not rebuild overnight. Sometimes she pulled away without meaning to. Sometimes fear spoke louder than hope. Each time he met her hesitation with patience, never forcing her forward, never stepping back in frustration. The town changed slowly, not because people suddenly became kinder, but because her posture changed. She walked differently. She spoke with more certainty. She no longer carried the weight of invisibility. One morning, as the sun rose over the fields, she stood at the road where she had once waited for people who never returned. The road looked the same, long and open, stretching toward places she still did not know. He joined her without a word. "I used to think this road only led away," she said. "And now?" he asked. "Now I think it leads wherever you choose to go," she replied. He smiled, not widely but genuinely. They did not speak of forever. They did not need to. What they had was real because it was present. He had returned when no one else would. She had allowed herself to be seen when hiding felt safer. Their story did not end with certainty, but with something better: choice, presence, quiet commitment. As the day began, she turned away from the road and walked back toward the town, not alone this time. And for the first time in her life, she did not feel like someone left behind. She felt chosen.